everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. Even with everything that's going on in the world right now, the U.S. Census is still moving forward. Today, Dr. Larry Sanders, our OSU Extension Ag Policy Specialist, tells us how Oklahomans are still being counted.
Well, it's been a exciting time for counting heads for the 2020 census. This is a number that is going to have to last for 10 years, and it's especially important to everybody in Oklahoma because for all the federal programs that people living in Oklahoma benefit from, they will have a formula that they determine how much federal money will be distributed. So whether we're talking about money that comes to support our fire departments, our police departments, our schools, our colleges, our roads, our bridges, libraries, you name it, when the federal government sits down at a table, literally and or on a computer and runs these formulas, they will pull that number out that they are determining right now by literally going out and counting each one of our heads and our kids' heads and our parents' heads and our aunts and our uncles and our neighbors, and they'll determine how much of that money can go to our town, our city, our region, our state, and that's the amount of money we'll get from them. They can take the survey that they may have gotten in the mail, fill it out, seal it up, send it back. Doesn't need a postage stamp. They have hired thousands of counters, and they are literally going out and knocking on doors in our communities. They've either gotten to your door already and you may have talked to them, or if they haven't, they're on their way.
It's almost time to start planting those winter crops, and Josh, one of the crops that has been overlooked over the past few years is a great rotational crop to help clean up wheat. We call it canola.
We do call it canola, Dave. It's been that way for a long time, but yeah, it's still a great crop. You know, our acres have gone down in recent years due to a couple of reasons. However, we see that the folks that planted it last year are kind of in that situation again of, you know, am I going to go back to it because it served its purpose and it did so well last year.
People often look at it for this oil seed purpose, but it's actually an opportunity for producers to come through and clean up fields with grasses.
Yeah, it's a great crop, great oil seed crop. Still got a decent market for it. Price is looking a little bit better. However, I always go back to what, you know, Tom Pieper, you know, great weed scientist in Oklahoma, always used to say it's the best herbicide you can bring to a wheat field. And that's true. It's all about being able to rotate those chemistries. If you can find the seed, getting glyphosate into the mix, being able to focus with some more of those graminicide herbicides because we can put those over the top of canola, and just a great reason for it to still be in our more continual wheat systems.
Now that's looking at some of the upcoming winter crops. How are the summer crops progressing across the state generically?
I think we've said it the last couple of years is what mile marker are you at? And that's kind of where we're still at. The kind of the doldrums of summer hit some areas a lot harder than some other areas. However, we were so dry going into that in some areas, virtually none of that's left. Plus the fact that we're still 100 degrees in some areas of the state, it just doesn't hold on long. And so in some of those areas, we are getting fairly dry still yet again. In some areas, we look great. And some of our best looking crops, even though we've been hot and we've missed some rainfalls, our evening temperatures have been fairly modest. We've been in the 60s and 70s for the bulk majority of the summer in most of our state. And so we are still seeing a lot of positives of getting some good growth during the day, but really cooling off in the evenings. And with those timely rains we've been getting over the last like 5 to 6 weeks, have really starting to help. Some of the crops that were starting to work their way backwards are coming out of it. Like I said, unfortunately, in some of those areas, we were almost too far gone when we started getting those rains.
And also, we're approaching the final run for progress in many of those crops too.
Yeah, I expect to see some combines start rolling through the field, whether it be corn. We definitely have some corn that's at black layer. We might even see some fields this week go into the bin on corn, that real early planted corn. Some of our sorghum variety trials out in the state have already hit black layers, so we're looking at desiccation of those. So we should be rolling combines through a lot of the sorghum fields in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Things like our soybean crop, our bean crop, our sesame crop, and some of those are a little far off. But some of these really early planted grain crops, we're getting really close. But I mean, we are in the second week of August, so it's time. It's kind of funny because 2020 was almost the year that everyone forgot, and we've progressed through the summer really fast, and it's about time for fall. So yeah, it's about time to start harvesting those crops, and it's a good thing we're talking about canola because it's the best time to start getting ground ready for our winter crops.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Josh Lofton, Cropping System Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Here we are in the middle of August and just a couple of weeks away from the start of the fall calving season. And in fact, some of the research done here at Oklahoma State University a number of years ago indicates that start of the fall calving season may be closer than we think. You see, research that was done here looked at the impact of hot weather during late gestation on its effect on gestation length. You know that when you look at the tables that you find printed in the books or the fact sheets, that the average gestation length of cattle is about 283 days. And so, if you're thinking that I planned the breeding program so that the calving would start around the 1st of September, you may be in for a bit of a surprise. Dr. Hagerman here at Oklahoma State, a number of years ago, took 60 head of Angus and Angus Hereford crossbred cows, broke them into half so that 30 of the cows were bred to calve starting in August and into September. The other half were bred to calve in cooler weather, October and November. He did that for 2 consecutive years. The first year, the cows that calved in the heat of the summer, where the average high temperature that year was about 93 degrees the week before calving started, they had 6 days shorter average gestation length than did their counterparts that calved in cooler weather, the weather at that time being about 66 degrees for a high during October and November. He did the same thing the following year, and the difference then was 4 days. So if we put the 2 data sets together, we can say that on the average, it looks like cows that are going to calve after the hot part of summer are going to calve on the average about 5 days sooner than what we might predict in terms of looking at the table in the book. So I think that means that instead of waiting until the 1st of September to start doing your heifer checks at night to see which ones might need your assistance, we better start at least 5, if not close to 10 days before that. We know there will be some variation around the average. There will always be a few that come early no matter which season of the year. So we better expect to have a few of these calve before we have that expected calving date of September 1st. So let's look at these cattle a little bit sooner. Perhaps we can save just a few more calves and help our bottom line. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on Sunup's Cow-Calf Corner.
We are joined now by Dr. Amy Hagerman, our Extension Ag Policy Specialist. Amy, there is a deadline coming up that we need to talk about.
Absolutely. The Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, we've been hearing about it since May when it first opened, and I would really encourage all of our producers to figure out what they have that's eligible, and if they are eligible, contact their FSA office. Get this application in, because it's really short and it's pretty fast.
You are wanting to speak specifically to cattle producers. What message do you have for them?
So for our cattle producers in the state, these are really some fairly high payments for any inventory that was sold January 15th to April 15th. And so it's a one-page application. Figure out if the cattle you sold are eligible in that period. Then from April 15th until May 15th is based on inventory at $33 a head. But still, even if you only have inventory across that entire period, get your application in, get yourself in this CFAP system, because if we do get some further funding out of the HEALS bill or some of these other bills that have been introduced at the federal level, that could speed up the next process, the next round. It's been really fast payments on this program, about a week turnaround in some counties, and that's really, really fast. From the time you turn in your paperwork, it's all self-certification. You fill out your application, you're self-certifying what your numbers are that you're turning in, and about a week later, people have payments in their bank accounts. And that's great, especially kind of going into this fall timing when there's some expenses that might be coming around. It's good to have that fast payment. We've actually had a lot of cattle producers in the state that haven't taken advantage of this at this point. Based on LFP numbers, there's maybe as many as 10,000 cattle producers out there that could be eligible for this program that haven't signed up yet. So those cattle producers in particular, I would really love to see them get in and talk to their FSA office.
We're talking cattle, but any updates for crop producers at this time?
So a lot of our crop producers didn't have eligible inventory for the CFAP program. For our soybean and our corn producers, a lot of their crop was already sold by that January 15th timeline. We don't yet know what those deadlines will be going into potentially the second round of CFAP money. So those crop producers really need to stay tuned on what the updates would be for them going forward. As this program potentially expands based on the HEALS Act that was introduced, we would just have to wait and see what this means for our winter wheat producers in the state.
And you have all of this and more in your new blog that's just out.
Yeah, we just started a brand new blog for ag policy through OK State, and I'm really excited to be able to provide really quick, timely information.
Great, we will look for that. Thanks a lot, Amy. And for a link to Amy's new blog, go to sunup.okstate.edu.
As we get into late summer, insects are out, and that means grasshoppers are out. So Tom, a lot of people are concerned when it comes to grasshoppers and crops, but that's really not that big of a problem, is it?
It isn't a problem for most of the state this year because most of the grasshoppers, real big populations, are out in western Oklahoma. They can cause problems in corn and sorghum and things like that, but we just don't have the kind of numbers that would be that much of a concern. Grasshopper populations fluctuate up and down, and when I first came here in like '97, they were a tremendous problem in a lot of the state, and then they disappeared, and they just kind of come and go. So if there's a hot spot where crops are being damaged, yeah, the producer's going to have to do something about them. But a lot of times they're more in western Oklahoma where there's a lot more rangeland pasture and things like that. Grasshoppers are typically feed on like this sorghum plant right here. They feed along the edges, and they'll chew all the way down to the main vein of that leaf. So they can literally make it look like the crop had hail damage. I mean, they strip the leaves down to almost nothing, but this is very typical of the kind of damage that a grasshopper causes when they feed.
But they can be an issue when it comes to, kind of smaller productions like gardens and
situations
absolutely.
like that. Yeah, gardeners, probably more of the questions that we get
in our department are gardeners and people just trying to protect their prize roses or their prize whatever plants they have, because wing can go anywhere. They look at a garden like an oasis of like a smorgasbord. So what we've suggested in the past is to get some horticultural fabric and protect your prize plants, and then probably just let the grasshoppers have the rest, because if they get really numerous, they'll even chew on screen, nylon screens and door screens and things like that. They become voracious. They're looking for, moisture and anything to eat.
A lot of the state has quite a bit of rain. Does that affect how bad or how, better the situation is going to be when it comes to grasshoppers?
I would say in general, yes, because there's still a lot of green plant material around. It's not all drying down like it would in some years. But maybe the farther west you go, there's some areas out in western Oklahoma that are a little sparser for rain. A grasshopper will eat its body weight in forage every day, where it's 100% of its body weight, whereas a cow or cattle will eat about 2 to 3% of their body weight in a day. So 60 to 80 pounds of grasshoppers is equivalent to a 500-pound cow in terms of what they'll eat for rangeland. Grasses and forbs and things. So they can really cause problems in those areas where we have a lot of rangeland and pasture. We have some suggestions on, we have a fact sheet for managing grasshoppers in rangeland and pasture, crops, rangeland and pasture, and managing grasshoppers in lawns and gardens. Unfortunately, the time of year we have right now, the fact that these grasshoppers all have wings, is not the best time to manage them. The best time to manage them is in June, when they're still coming up out of the ground, hatching up from out of the ground. They're small. That's the best time to control them, but a lot of people just don't pay attention to them back then because they're little and they don't think much about them until they get big and hungry.
They cause a lot of problems.
Yes.
Alrighty, Tom. Tom Royer, Extension Entomologist here at Oklahoma State University. And if you'd like the link to the fact sheet that Tom referenced, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. So far this summer, we have had some very warm spells, a few much cooler than normal spells, but not much extremely hot weather. You can see from this map showing days above 100 degrees that with the exception of Latimer County, no sites in the eastern half of the state has seen the century mark as of Wednesday morning. But why then has it seemed so hot? The answer to that may be because of the excessive moisture in the air. This chart is average dew point temperatures, a measurement of air moisture not dependent on temperature. It runs from July 1 through Wednesday of this week. The dark line shows this year's readings and the blue field is the long-term average. Over 45 days, only a couple of days came in below normal. This causes the felt temperature or heat index to run higher. This table from the National Weather Service shows just how much humidity or moisture in the air impacts the felt temperature. A 70% humidity can make an 88-degree temperature feel like it is 100 degrees. This heat index map from Wednesday afternoon shows that high humidities in southern Oklahoma were creating a felt-like temperature of 110 degrees near Ardmore, while the measured air temperature was only 98 at the time. Next up is Gary with a cooler temperature forecast.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, we were lucky enough to get a good rain across the state once again over the past week, which helped reduce some of that drought coverage once again. So we've steadily reduced the drought coverage over the summer months, especially as we got into July, into the early parts of August. Now, we still have some parts of the state hurting, but at least we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, we hope. Well, here you can see we still have the broad area of drought across the western half to 1/3 of Oklahoma. Really it extends over into, just barely over into central Oklahoma as we start to get into the westernmost parts of Blaine and Caddo County. If we look at the rainfall from the Mesonet for the past 10 days, we see some of those generous rainfalls extending from eastern Beaver County into Harper County, where they had some pretty bad flooding impacts. down through central Oklahoma, even down into parts of southeastern Oklahoma. And of course, east central Oklahoma got some pretty good rains as well. So again, some replenishment of the soils in these areas, some diminishing of the drought impacts. And that's why we have the improvement in the drought picture. Now we're currently pretty hot across the state. We have been for about a week or so. What do we see when we start to look for next week? Well, we start to see a little bit increased odds for below normal temperatures across the state. Maybe some 80s, low 80s in parts of the state as we start the early next week. Now, next week's rainfall outlook doesn't look quite as good, but we've seen this before and it's actually turned out quite well. So we'll hope this outlook from the Climate Prediction Center doesn't really come true and we do see some rains. But it would always be good to get some rain as we go through August. So if we don't, that's not really that unexpected, but if we do, it will, of course, be an added benefit. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
The latest WASDE report came out earlier this week, and Kim, there were some big numbers in that report.
Well, that's a pretty big report, and it's a lot of surprises in this report. You look at production in the United States for corn and soybeans. The pre-release estimate was 15,174,000,000 bushels for corn. Big harvest. It came in at 15,278, above expectations. You look at soybeans, a big harvest of 4.254 billion expected. It came in at 4.425, 175 million above expectations. However, if you look at any stocks for corn and beans, corn, they expected 2.8 billion, came in at 2.756. So they increased the demand estimate there. Soybeans, they expected 524 million, they got 610 million. So I think it's negative for beans, positive for corn. If you look at wheat, it's real negative for wheat. The expectation was 946 million bushels. It came in at 1.044 billion bushels, about 100 million bushels above expectations. I think that's going to be negative for U.S. wheat prices.
We always seem to focus on stuff happening in the Ukraine and Russia and that region, the Black Sea area. Where are we with those estimates?
Well, right now the production looks like it's going to be about 200 million bushels above last year. You've got higher production in Russia, and that's still an unknown. You look at U.S. estimates for Russia, it's about 2.85 billion bushels. There's some analysts in Russia that have that crop at 3 billion bushels. So there's still some uncertainty there. Ukraine about the same to slightly higher than last year. The Black Sea area, higher production and higher exports.
With all of that information and where we are with the calendar, do you foresee us hitting a bottom of the wheat prices here soon?
Well, I think wheat prices are relatively close. I think we've got that harvest pressure from the Black Sea area already in the market. Could be some surprises there, but not much. The big uncertainty right now, I think, is Australia. They're looking at about a 400 million bushel increase in crop from about 550 to over 900 million bushels. We'll see if they can get that crop in the bin. But I think that's already in the price. And so we should be near the bottom for wheat prices and maybe pick up just a little rally.
Just briefly, where are we with the soybeans and the corn prices?
I think corn prices have probably bottomed out. They've been near the not historical low, but the low we've seen the last 5 or 6 years. I think corn prices have probably bottomed out with the increased ending stocks for soybeans. I think we might see beans going a little bit lower.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
If you raise rabbits or have a pet rabbit, you probably have heard of the disease Rabbit Hemorrhagic Disease. There's basically 3 different serotypes to this virus. One of those is Rabbit Hemorrhagic Disease virus serotype 2. This particular virus was originally found in Europe around 2010. But in the summer of 2018, in the state of Washington, this serotype 2 was diagnosed in a pet rabbit. Now the interesting thing about serotype 2 is it's not only fatal to domestic rabbits, it's also fatal to wild rabbits. In the spring of this year, this particular serotype 2 has been found in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas in domestic and wild rabbits. Now typically when a rabbit has hemorrhagic disease, most of the time we're going to find dead rabbits. That's what we'll see, with maybe a little bit of crust of blood in the nasal passages. Those that survive for a day or two are going to have a fever. They're going to tend not want to eat. They're going to be very lethargic, lay around. We're probably going to see some respiratory signs, heavy breathing, maybe some cyanotic membranes, some bluish color to those membranes. We'll also see some neurological signs. This virus is highly contagious. It's easily spread from one rabbit to the next. It can be found on their fur. It can be found in the tissues, and that's why decaying carcasses, the virus will stay in those carcasses for long periods of time. We suspect that the virus is present in just about any fluid in the rabbit, as far as blood, fecal material, or urine. It's easy for a person to get in an area where the virus is and get it on their feet and clothes and take it back to their home where they have their rabbits and can infect their rabbits. As far as treatment is concerned, you treat symptoms. We have no specific treatment for the disease. The USDA has a protocol for rabbit owners on biosecurity. If you'll go to sunup.okstate.edu, we'll put that on the website.
Thanks so much for joining us this week for SUNUP. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm LYNDALL STOUT. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.